The late Republic of Rome was a time of great instability, with corruption and conflict engulfing the political system. Amid this chaos, one man emerged with unprecedented power, Julius Caesar. A brilliant military strategist, Caesar's conquests across Gaul brought him fame, wealth, and a loyal following. His rise threatened the delicate balance of power that had long been maintained in Rome. The Senate, once the ultimate authority, began to fear his growing influence. By the time Caesar returned to Rome in 49 BC, the Senate saw him as a dangerous rival. They offered him a choice: disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, or face the full force of Rome's legal system. Caesar, however, crossed the Rubicon, famously declaring, "The die is cast," signaling the beginning of a civil war. His defiance shattered the traditional power structures of Rome and marked the end of the Republic. With Caesar's victory in the Civil War, the Republic was effectively at an end. He became dictator for life, consolidating unprecedented control over Rome. For many senators, this was the final straw. They saw Caesar not as a hero, but as a tyrant whose rule threatened their very existence. The Senate had once been the seat of Roman power, but now it was reduced to a mere figurehead, with Caesar at the helm. In the Senate, the atmosphere had become thick with fear and envy. Many senators had once been close to Caesar, but now they saw him as a threat to their privileges and power. A group of conservative senators, known as the Optimates, believed that Caesar's rule was an affront to the ideals of the Roman Republic. They feared that his ambitions would lead to the collapse of everything they held dear. But it wasn't just political concerns that fueled their hatred. There was personal jealousy too. The closer Caesar grew to absolute power, the more the senators began to whisper behind his back. His charisma, his military victories, and his ability to sway the masses were qualities that many found impossible to rival. As Caesar grew in power, the Senate's influence dwindled. The fear of being sidelined in a new order created an atmosphere of resentment. For many, Caesar was not just a political opponent. He was a direct threat to their status and legacy. Some senators viewed the possibility of a tyrant ruling Rome as an inevitable consequence of Caesar's reign. His declaration of lifetime dictatorship was seen as the final proof that he would not step down. Among these senators, a growing conspiracy began to take shape. They saw only one way to restore the Republic: assassination. But the question remained: who would take the first step? The first whispers of conspiracy began to surface in the shadows of the Senate, where discontent simmered beneath the surface. A small group of senators, led by Marcus Brutus and Gaius Cassius, began to meet in secret. They were convinced that the only way to save Rome from Caesar's rule was to kill him. For Brutus, the decision was personal. He had once been a close ally of Caesar, even serving as his protege. Yet, as he saw Caesar's power grow, Brutus became increasingly uncomfortable with his mentor's ambition. Brutus's internal conflict was intense. While he felt a deep loyalty to Caesar, he also believed in the principles of the Republic and the idea of a government without a monarch. He struggled with the idea of betrayal, torn between his personal affection for Caesar and his duty to Rome. Cassius, more pragmatic and less emotionally tied to Caesar, pushed Brutus to act, convincing him that killing Caesar was the only way to restore the Republic. As the conspiracy grew, so did the danger. The senators knew that if their plot was discovered, they would face death. Yet the stakes were higher than ever. Rome was at a crossroads, and they believed that their only choice was to act decisively. The plot began to take shape, and with each passing day, the conspirators drew closer to their fateful decision. Marcus Brutus, a man of high moral character, found himself torn between two worlds. On one hand, there was his deep friendship with Caesar, who had been like a father to him. On the other, there was his belief in the Republic, in the ideals of freedom and democracy that had made Rome great. Brutus had been raised to value the Roman state above all else, and the thought of allowing one man to rule as a dictator was unbearable to him. The internal struggle Brutus faced was excruciating. He could not reconcile his loyalty to Caesar with his growing sense that the Republic was in peril. Was it better to preserve the life of the man who had been his mentor, or to risk everything to ensure that Rome did not fall into the hands of a single ruler? His conscience was divided, and each night he wrestled with the enormity of the decision that lay before him. In the end, it was the sense of duty to Rome that pushed Brutus toward the conspiracy. He convinced himself that by killing Caesar, he was saving Rome from tyranny. But deep down, he knew that this decision would change everything. no matter what happened next, he would never be the same. The question was no longer if he would act, but when. The moment of truth came in the days leading up to Caesar's assassination. The conspirators had made their decision. Caesar must die, and the Senate must be rid of him. But while the plan was set, the fear of discovery still loomed large. The conspirators knew that Caesar was a powerful man, and killing him would have repercussions beyond their understanding. The plot could fail, and they could lose everything. Yet, they believed that the Republic itself was at stake. The night before the assassination, the conspirators gathered once more, finalizing the details of the plot. It was now or never. Brutus, despite his inner turmoil, had made his peace with the decision. He was ready to act. For him, the fate of Rome outweighed his personal bond with Caesar. This was a turning point in Roman history, one that would forever alter the future of the Republic. The morning of the Ides of March arrived, and with it, the fateful day. Caesar would walk into the Senate house unaware that a group of his closest allies had plotted his death. As he passed through the doors of the Senate, little did he know that his fate had already been sealed. The conspiracy had reached its climax, and the time for action had arrived. The Ides of March dawned with the usual bustle of Roman life, but there was a tension in the air. Caesar was on his way to the Senate house, oblivious to the plot that awaited him. His assassination had been meticulously planned by the conspirators, and every detail had been considered. It was a day like any other, but it would mark the end of an era. The man who had dominated Rome for years would soon be gone. As Caesar entered the Senate, the conspirators gathered around him, pretending to be his loyal supporters. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. Then, as Caesar took his seat, the moment came. Casca, one of the conspirators, struck first, and the others quickly followed. The Senate house became a scene of chaos and betrayal, as Caesar was surrounded by those he had trusted most. Despite his shock and confusion, Caesar's last words were directed at Brutus, his adopted son. "Et tu, Brute, and you, Brutus?" The betrayal was complete, and Caesar fell to the ground, his life snuffed out by the hands of those who had once called him friend. The aftermath of Caesar's assassination sent shockwaves through Rome. The city, once so controlled and orderly, was thrown into chaos. The Senate was in disarray, and the people were uncertain of what would come next. News of Caesar's death spread like wildfire, and with it, the hope of restoring the Republic seemed to fade. Instead, Rome now faced a power vacuum that no one could fill. While the conspirators celebrated their success, they soon realized that they had unleashed something far beyond their control. Caesar's loyalists, led by his adopted son Octavian, began to rally support, vowing to avenge his death. The conspirators had hoped that by killing Caesar, they would restore the Republic, but instead, they had set the stage for another civil war. Rome was no longer a republic. It was a state on the brink of collapse. The assassination of Caesar had set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the rise of the empire and the end of the Roman Republic forever. The dream of restoring the Republic died with Caesar, and the future of Rome would never be the same. The question remains, who was truly behind the assassination of Julius Caesar? While Brutus and Cassius were the faces of the conspiracy, many believed there were hidden forces at work. Were the conspirators motivated purely by their loyalty to Rome, or were there deeper, more personal motives at play? Had they been manipulated by those seeking to use Caesar's death to further their own ambitions? In the aftermath, many began to speculate about the true mastermind behind the plot. Some pointed to the Senate, others to rival political figures, but the truth remained elusive. What is clear is that Caesar's death set off a chain of events that would change Rome forever. Whether the conspirators acted for the good of the Republic or for their own gain remains a topic of debate to this day. As we look back on the assassination of Julius Caesar, we are reminded that history is often shaped by those who operate in the shadows, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. The fall of Caesar was not just the end of a man, but the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Rome.